Hi everyone and welcome to your Maravilla Maker Kit. These are general instructions for all of our earring kits, so you'll be able to follow the same basic instructions regardless of what kit you might have. For today's video, I am using our Frida earring kit. Your kit might be a little bit different, but the components are the same. So first, before we get started, I want to make sure that we go through all of our pieces so we get to know what we have and what we'll be using. So first you should see a pair of 3D printed spacers. You will see one on the top left that says EUM1 and the other should say EUM2 and 3. Now these correspond to the cutters that you received in your kit. Again, your cutters might look a little bit different, but the numbering system should be the same. So this cutter, which is our main cutter, our larger cutter, says EUM1, so I will be using this thickness for the clay for this cutter. This spacer has EUM2 and 3, so I will be using my cutter, which is a detail cutter that says EUM2 on there, and then our tiny detail cutter, our little flower cutter, says EUM3. And again, yours might look a little bit different, but same rules apply. So just make sure that whatever piece you need to cut out, you're using the proper depth guide for the clay. This is what you're going to use to roll your clay out evenly. And so this obviously is a little bit thicker since it's going to be for the base of our earring. And then this clay guide is a little thinner because it's just for the detail. Next, we have our other 3D printed component, which are our tweezers. You will be using this to open and close your jump rings and attach them to your earrings once you're all done at the very end. Let's move on to our clay. So you should have 5 different colors of clay, or you might have 4. It really depends on your kit, but regardless, you have all of your clay colors and your components so that you can make your earrings. So this is my sample that I will be recreating today for this video, but again, your colors might be different. Now, don't be afraid to mix your colors. This is just an example of what your earrings could look like, but you could definitely get really creative with using your colors on your earrings. You should also have some cornstarch. It might be in a little Ziploc bag or in these little cups, and a little skewer. This is going to act as our detail and our tool for the entire activity, so make sure you know where this is. And lastly, we have our roller for our clay. So this is what we're going to be rolling our clay out with. And if you notice, it works perfectly with your spacers, so you are able to stay on the spacer as you roll with your roller. And you also have your finding, so this is what you're going to use at the end once you've baked your earrings to assemble them. You should have enough to make 2 pairs of earrings. And again, it really depends on what you chose. You might have ball studs or earring hooks, but I will show you how to attach both just in case, so that you know what you're doing. And actually, almost forgot, you should also have 2 sheets of parchment paper. This is what you're going to use to work on and then to bake your pieces. You're going to be moving your pieces to bake them on a baking sheet, and so using this while you're working is really going to make that process easy because you're just going to have to lift it and move it over. The only other thing that I can suggest to have is a paper towel, just in case you want to wipe your hands when you're working with the different colored clay. This can be really, really handy. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Like I mentioned, this is my sample earring for today. I will be recreating this one. Your kit might look a little bit differently, but the same basic rules apply. I know that I will be using my number 1 clay depth guide, a piece of parchment paper, so we'll go ahead and place it like so, and most likely the biggest piece of clay that you have in your kit, or whatever you're going to be making this base piece out of, and of course your big cutter that corresponds with your spacer. So first I'm going to teach you how to condition your clay. It is crucial to condition polymer clay when working with it at home. If you don't, the clay might be crumbly, really difficult to use, or really stiff and hard, so it's really important to condition it before using it. The best way to do that without a clay conditioning machine, which is really a pasta machine, is to roll it through your hands like so until you're able to form more of a shape of a log, And this might require a lot of pressure with your thumb, so don't be afraid. The best thing about working with polymer clay is that if you mess up, you can always recondition it and start over. So I'm just rolling it in between my hands, and then I'm going to get it into a log shape. And you will be doing this for all of your clay colors. Okay, so once your clay looks more like a log, the best way to condition is to fold in half, give the clay a few twists, and you're going to start seeing that it's going to break, which means it's not conditioned, and then you're going to roll again. So we're going to repeat this process until our clay is soft, and I will show you what that's going to look like as we continue to condition our clay. You also want to apply some pressure to kind of close those gaps as you're working with it. And again, this might take a few minutes per color, but it is the best and fastest way to condition your clay. All right, so now we have a long log again, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to fold in half and twist, apply pressure as we roll. Now you should be working on a flat work surface. I'm using a piece of tile. If you don't have tile, that's fine. Just make sure that your work surface is clean, so give it a good wipe. You can also roll on your work surface to help move along the process and get that shape a lot quicker. Okay, and you're going to repeat that process for as long as you need to until your clay starts to feel soft. You will notice the difference, and I will show you what that might look like. I'm going to just press it in half this time, and you see how easily I'm able to squeeze it now. You will feel a major difference in your clay when you're able to do that. I'm going to fold it in half again because I think it's time to start working with it. So we will be using our roller to roll it out flat, but it's easy to fold it in half and then half again. And then now what we want to do is try to make a flat piece of clay, and I kind of want to shape it as a rectangle so that it'll fit within our clay depth guide, and I will have enough surface area to cut out 2 of my pieces using my main cutter, my number 1 cutter. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to kind of press them together to make sure I get rid of those lines, because those are just gaps in the clay. And this is what you're looking for. Put my parchment paper back, my number 1 spacer, make sure it's number 1. I will work with it like this. But if you have a kit where you can cut it side by side. I'm going to try and do this instead, and then leave a little space on your parchment paper for the other colors that we will be needing it for. So I will show you what that looks like in a moment. I'm going to place this here, and I'm going to grab my roller so that we can roll. Alright, so I'm going to face my cutter vertically like this, or my spacer, I'm sorry, vertically like this with the parchment paper, because remember we are using our roller, and the roller does not fit this way, it only fits this way. So all that means is I'm going to put my clay down. I already had rolled it a little bit before I started the video, but I'm going to lay my clay down, and even though I'm going to work with it like this at the end, I'm obviously going to need to turn it this way to roll out my clay. This looks like too much clay, by the way, so I will probably have to trim it back, but I do want to show you a couple of techniques for rolling out your clay. The first thing that you want to make sure is that you're going very low pressure and taking your time with rolling it out. If you apply too much pressure, your clay will stick to your roller and you will be peeling pieces off of your clay. So you want to start in the middle, and you're going to apply pressure as you go down and towards you. You can start that way. And that was actually a little bit too much pressure because I pulled up a little bit of the clay, and that's another reason why having a paper towel around is very handy. So less pressure than that, and start in the middle and away from you, and then middle towards you, and middle away, and then you can kind of just repeat this process until you start to feel that you're hitting the depth guide, and I will show you what that sounds like in a second. I am going to cut a piece of this because I can obviously get more than 2 pieces from here, and I won't be able to stretch it out as much as I want, so I'm gonna take my handy dandy skewer and just make a little line and pull that piece off. The easiest way to do that would be just to lift it and pull it away, just like that. We can put that to the side and keep going. Okay, I ended up cutting a little bit more away because my clay wasn't fitting, but I will show you what it sounds like and what you'll feel when you're done rolling out your clay. You should hear your roller touching those depth guides, okay? And you should also feel as you're gliding smoothly over that depth guide, okay? So I'm pretty much there. I'm gonna go ahead and stop for that piece. And that is what you should feel when you're ready to go. So now I'm gonna switch over my piece of parchment, and it's time to use your number 1 cutter. Again, this might look different for you, but regardless of what cutter you're using, regardless of what shape is your number 1 cutter, you absolutely need to use your cornstarch. Your cornstarch is there for you to use so that your clay does not get stuck to your cutter and vice versa. So I'm actually gonna apply some of that cornstarch on the actual clay, and I'm just going to rub it through to make sure that it's completely covered. For those of you that are familiar with like makeup primers, this is kind of that's a good example. It gives it clay a matte finish, so it's not sticky, so that the cut will go through easily, and so that your cutter doesn't get stuck in your clay either. So it's going to give you that matte feel. You also want to put a little bit of cornstarch on your working area because you're going to stamp your cutter into the cornstarch so that your cutting edges and your stamp is nice and matte as well, and you're going to get the cut and shape that you want. So your cutter should look like so. Alright, so now I'm ready to cut. I'm going to try and leave as much extra space as possible on my little piece of parchment so that I can use my other colors for it. So I'm going to make my cuts all the way on the edge, or as further away as far away as I can. I'm going to place my cutter there. The important thing to note with our cutters, your stamp detail will show. In this case, it's her eyebrow. So don't worry about applying a lot of pressure on the eyebrow. Plus, you will be adding some black clay on top of that. So that's really just to give you a guide as to where her eyebrow goes. Again, regardless of what kind of cutter you're using, don't worry about squishing really hard for the detail or the stamp. Just worry about applying pressure on the cutting edge or on the outside edge, okay? So that's all you have to do. Before you peel it or before you try to lift it, hold the clay on the edges down with your parchment paper. Give that clay cutter a little wiggle, and it should come right out, just like so. So we have a perfect cut with all the stamps, and all we did was apply pressure on the outside edge. I'm going to go back into the cornstarch. Every time you use your cutter, dip it in the cornstarch first. And then I'm going to do this one a little bit lower because I can. I'm going to make sure that the edge isn't touching the other piece because I can see underneath. Same thing, apply pressure on the outside only. Make your cut. Hold your clay down. I don't need any of this clay so I can hold it. Give it a wiggle as you release and you will feel it come off. There we go. All done. So now before you finish up, you can pick up your piece, dust off any extra cornstarch, move that over or away from your pieces, and then you're going to hold down the parchment paper and peel away the excess clay. This is enough clay plus all this extra that I didn't cut, or that I cut, to make another pair of earrings. So up to you, but you have it there. Now we have our pieces. I'm just going to dust them off a little bit. You can use your fingers, don't be afraid. The clay is nice and matte too, so as long as you're not applying a bunch of pressure, you should be totally fine. One thing that you can do if you'd like to clean up your earrings a little bit before you bake them is just go around the edge. So now that we have our base, we can work on our secondary colors or all of our details. So I'm going to repeat the process for conditioning all of my clay. I'm gonna go ahead and condition everything ahead of time so I don't have to show you the exact same thing. I just realized this is black, so that's the darkest one. I'm gonna start with the yellow, wipe my hands, work with the pink, wipe my hands, or wash your hands because red and pink do stain your fingers pretty easily. And then I'm going to work with the green and then lastly the black. So don't be afraid to wash your hands in between your colors so that you don't stain your clay, especially if you're working with light colors. Wash or wipe your hands in between. So I'm going to precondition all of our clay and I will be back to show you how you can add your details. Alright, so I have my next color, that's the biggest piece for this kit here. And then remember, I'm going to use my number 2-3 depth guide because it's smaller, it's thinner, and make sure you have your number 2 cutter. So this is for her hair detail. This might look different for your kit depending on which one you've purchased. Now, what we're going to try to do is roll this out as evenly as possible on the corner of this parchment paper. So this is why I told you to make sure you're using this on the side. If you're not going to be doing another pair of earrings, or if you have more parchment paper at home, you could use the extra piece of paper that I added for you for all of your details. So it really depends on what you're working with. But I'm going to try and work here on the corner so you can see what that might look like at home in case that is what you end up doing. I'm going to make this a little smaller so that I can roll it out because it's just for the 2 pieces of the hair, so it should be enough. Move that away and add this to the corner here and grab my roller. So I'm just working back and forth, so don't be afraid of working with it, and that can totally happen. It actually looks pretty smooth, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to lay that here on the side and get rid of my spacer for now with my roller. So next I'm going to do what we did earlier. I'm going to add some cornstarch to my black clay to make the layer on the top nice and matte. And I'm also going to add some of that cornstarch on my cutter, which is my number 2 cutter, which is using number 2 spacer. And I'm going to make my cut. Go ahead and press all the way around on the outside. Hold your clay down wherever you need to and shimmy as you come up. Might require a little bit more, especially if your number 2 cutter is smaller than your main cutter, of course. I'm going to do the same thing here. Hold the clay down on the edges that I don't need anymore and peel away. Now this might happen, that's totally fine. If you can reach, you can put your fingers through and then peel it out. You can also use the back of the skewer to help push the clay out very lightly, and you'll have your piece. And this actually works out perfectly because then I can just lay it on my main piece here. So I'm just going to go ahead and wipe away as much of that cornstarch as I can. You can leave a little bit of the cornstarch behind. After you bake your pieces, you can take a toothbrush and wash it with some mild soap and cool water, and that again is after you've baked your pieces. Or you can wipe as much as you can away right now, which is what I'm doing. So now I'm going to add my detail to my main cutter. Again, this might look different depending on what kit you're using, but you should have my sample as a reference, and you can always also change it up. If you didn't want to, like for example, if you didn't want to use this hair cutter for Frida and just lay out her black hair by hand, you could totally do that if you wanted. Just taking little bits of the black clay and sticking it on and then using your tool to kind of smooth it out. Or you can use your cutter like I have here. We're going to remove the excess over here. Put that aside, I don't need that anymore. Get rid of this cornstarch, move to the side. And now dust off this second piece, which also, the other great thing about using the parchment is that you can always lift to get that piece off quite easily. The great thing about having these stamps as a guide, which you should have regardless of the kit that you purchased, is that you know exactly where these pieces go, which is why I added those stamps. There, so here is her hair. I'm not afraid of pressing down or putting pressure here, cleaning off more of that cornstarch while I wet my hands on the paper towel. Okay, now it's time to get creative. You can add detail with your skewer, which is what I'm doing here, just to make it look more realistic like hair. Now for this instance, all I did was use a little piece of black, and you would need very little. And I'm going to roll it into a very thin log. So now that we have a thin noodle for the eyebrow, I'm going to probably need about half of this. So I'll cut this in half, put this aside for the next one, roll the edge, and now we can start. So I'm going to start on this edge actually, and try to tuck in her eyebrow. First, just by hand, by pressing it into the stamp that's given there, just to see where I need to cut this. So it looks like about right there. So I'm just going to hold it down. I'll cut it a little too short, but that's okay. We can push some clay into that space. And then all I'm doing is taking my skewer tool and basically laying it flat just to add that pressure to push this clay down, and then swiping away to keep it down. So I'm going to move some of this clay into that space. There we go. Perfect. Okay, and now with your different colored details, again, you can get as creative as you want. I'm going to try to use the same corner, so what I'm going to do is take a black piece of clay and gently roll it on top of that little bit that was left behind, and that is a great way to get rid of that excess clay if you want to remove it from parchment paper. On my sample, I did 2 flowers of each. You could do all yellow, all pink, only green flowers, only green little dots and yellow dots. It's totally up to you, but I'm just going to show you how to do the same thing. How to use the tiny little cutter, because it can be a little bit difficult. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to roll out our clay. This has been conditioned to the point where I'm almost there to the thickness, so I'm going to put that there. Place my spacer. Clean my roller, because it does have some black on it, so make sure you clean in between colors. And gently start to roll back and forth, which might require some patience to make sure it sticks to your parchment. There we go. Again, cornstarch on the top. Wipe away the excess. Just make sure it's nice and matte on the top. There we go. And this particular cutter has a little plunger in case when you're cutting at your flowers it gets stuck. You can put the plunger through to unstick your clay. So same technique here. I'm dipping my cutter into the clay, into the cornstarch, I'm sorry, and then making my cuts. I'm going to do just pink. So here we go. I got stuck. I'm going to take my plunger, fit it into the shape, and push out slowly and gently until the piece comes out. Now, one thing that I want to mention before I start placing my flowers is you need to think ahead as to where you're going to place the hole for the earring findings to go through. So I know that I want it right in the center, so that my earrings hang centered. So I'm going to find the center on my earring, and I'm going to use the pointy end of my skewer stick. I'm going to poke all the way through until I feel the parchment, and then draw tiny, tiny, tiny circles just to push the clay enough to give me space for that finding, as you can see here on this earring sample. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now so I know where my hole is and I don't cover it up, because you're going to need to make sure that that's fully accessible for your finding. So I've found the center, pierced it all the way through, and made tiny circles to push the clay out of the way. And I'm going to do the same thing here. You can either roll back and forth and then do tiny circles to move the clay out of the way. And now I know exactly where my findings are going to go, and I'm not going to make a mess and get in the way of that. So I didn't precondition my green because I only need a little bit of green clay, at least for what I'm recreating here. And all I'm going to do is make a tiny noodle, kind of what we did for the eyebrow in this case. But again, totally up to you. If you wanted to do green flowers, then you would just make sure to condition your clay ahead of time. So I'm just taking a little piece and I'm conditioning it in my hands, doing the same technique really. So folding it in half, rolling it a bit until it's nice and soft. This green is pretty soft already, so that's good. Alright, so my green headband is in. Now I can add my flower details. These should be pretty easy to pick up. If for some reason they're still attached to your parchment, remember you can pick it up and just peel them away from the corners of your parchment paper. Now I'm going to make sure that I'm not covering that hole there. So I'm going to go like this and apply pressure to squish that down. And then I'm going to fit the pink one into the yellow. So I'm just kind of rotating them so that the petals kind of interlock. And then we're going to repeat the same process to the other side. Okay, now you can add any last details. So for example, I'm going to use the back of the skewer just to press in to the center of my flowers to give them a little bit of detail. This also helps to adhere the clay, any kind of pressure that you're putting. You can also do little lines, so I'm just going to do a little, I'm just going to poke it a little bit on the yellow ones to show you what those details could look like. But totally get creative here. You can add more detail, like leaves. I will show you how to do that in a second. You can just add little dots and then poke them down into your clay. This is where you can really have fun and personalize your earrings. So here are little pieces of green clay that I have left over. Tiny, tiny, tiny. This is the size of a grain of rice, and actually that's a good size. So a great way to work with tiny details like this, make sure you can see it in the frame, yeah, is to use your skewer and poke it to lift it. Now it's already kind of the shape of a leaf because I rolled it out thin on both ends. And then you can honestly just put the details, put the details wherever you want. So the best way to do that is to press down with the, put pressure down and then swipe away. So here's another piece. I'm going to just roll it till it's pointy on one end. Pick it up with my skewer. I might take a little practice. Place it down and then apply pressure, kind of laying the skewer flat, and then slide away. And that's it. So now I can lift and just get rid of any excess, wipe away any little bits. Oop, not the earring. It's okay, just pick that up and put it back down. Press these down. There we go. So I am done with my earrings. I hope that you have fun with your details, regardless of what kit you purchased. Now, before we move on, please make sure that you watch or listen to the instructions on baking. It is crucial that you follow them to a T to make sure that you properly cure your earrings at the right temperature, because you can burn polymer clay and you can underbake it as well. So make sure to bake them properly. Please double check to make sure your oven is set to 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Place your earrings that are on the parchment paper on a baking sheet and bake them for 30 minutes. Set a timer so you don't forget them. When you remove your earrings, make sure that your kitchen is well ventilated, and when they're done baking, take them out of the oven using oven mitts. It is going to be hot, so be very careful working with your hot earrings. You want to let them cool completely on the baking sheet before moving on to the next step. Okay, so here is a baked earring. I'm going to show you how to do the finishing touches and attach your findings. If you didn't clean up your edges, now is a good time to use your nail to kind of scrape off any excess. And of course you're working with these once they're completely cooled. But let me show you how to use your tweezers and your findings. You have a little baggie that came with all of your findings. This bag is ball studs. Let's go ahead and open that. And remember, you have enough in here to make 2 pairs of earrings, so I'm just going to grab 2 ball studs, or 1 ball stud, because I just have the 1 earring right now, and the 8mm jump ring. And I'm also going to show you, so I'm going to put this away so I don't lose these pieces. I'm also going to show you how to attach the earring hook in case you got that. So you should have received also a pair of these tweezers. These are specifically designed by my husband Alvaro to work with these jump rings. So you'll notice on the inside of the tweezer, it's a little hard to see because the detail is small, but there is a little half circle that we've added to the inside of each tweezer, and that is meant to hold your jump ring in place to make it easier for you to use your tweezers. So when you get your jump rings, they should actually be closed, so they're gonna look like that, okay? Now we're gonna place the jump ring into the tweezer, making sure we're leaving the opening of the jump ring, the little slit, outside so that we can obviously open the jump ring. And I'm gonna place the other tweezer so that it is holding on using that little divot that we've designed. So when you're working with jump rings, you want to open by pushing one side away from you and one towards you. Okay, so you should have an opening that looks like that. I'm going to open it a little bit more. And that is how you open a jump ring. You're going to take your baked piece and weave your jump ring through the hole that you've already made. Okay, now is the tricky part. So if you have a ball stud, you obviously want to make sure that your earrings are hanging forward. So that means taking a look at your earring with the jump ring in it, and then making sure you're going to place the ball stud with the ball facing forward, not backward, or else your earring will be backwards. So all I'm going to do here is put that through the hole there, facing forward. And you can use either both the tweezers. I'm going to use the corners of each to close it by doing the same thing. So you're going to then push one towards you and one away. And as you're doing that, you want to make sure that when you're closing them, you're really closing that gap so that your ball stud doesn't come off. And that is how you attach a ball stud earring, and you would be all done. You should also find backings in your bag so that you can wear your beautiful earrings. So let's show you how to do the earring hook. With the earring hook, you're also going to have your jump ring. Go ahead and pick up your earring so you can see. You'll see that there's a tiny little jump ring attached to your earring hook. That is meant to be there so that when you wear your earrings, they hang forward. There's obviously going to be a little bit more movement, but they will still face forward. So that means that the hook, the pointy end, is what goes towards the back, and this curved end is what goes towards the front. So that means that I'm going to place the jump ring into the earring like so. Okay, so that is what that looks like, so that when they hang, they're hanging forward. I'm going to take my tweezers once more, hold them with the corners, push one towards me, one away, while making sure that I'm closing that gap. And now you have your earring hook attached and your earrings are ready to wear. You're all done. We hope you had a blast making your earrings. Please feel free to drop a review about your experience, and we hope to see you again next time.